Welcome everyone to this week's F3 track guide and the last of the current season. It's season 2 of this year, and I can't believe it's already coming to an end. We've got the fun of week 13 the following week. But yeah, it's been good. I've really enjoyed doing the track guides for you this year, or for this season. And I do want to apologise that there was no track guide for Silverstone last week. It killed me that I couldn't put one together for you. For anyone who doesn't know, my Oculus VR headset died on me last week, or just before the week started, and unfortunately, I've been going backwards and forwards with the Oculus support team to try and get a replacement. They've tried some fixes. I don't know if they're going to try and sort things out on their end, but at the moment it's not usable. It's just an expensive decoration at the moment. So yeah, I've spent pretty much most of last week getting getting used to using a single monitor again, and yes, it's taken me a lot of time. So I didn't feel comfortable putting a track guide together for you guys, as I felt like the quality of the track guides wouldn't have been up to my own personal standards. But I hope you guys had a good week there. Like I said, it is my favourite track in the world. So yeah, I hope you guys had a good week, and hopefully we can have a great one this week. So yeah, Watkins Glen. This week, track temperature is very, very hot. As we're now approaching end of May. This lap time I set was in a 46-degree track temperature. So over the course of a race, an F3 race, the tyres are probably going to lose a lot of grip towards the end of the race. So be careful. This lap. The lap what I do is, yes, it is a hot lap, but remember, when you've got a full tank of fuel, warm tyres, there's a little bit of a lifting here and there that you'll need to do just to gain control of the car. And Watkins Glen, there's quite a few, anyone who's raced around here knows, there's a couple of areas around here where there's no room for error. So you need to be careful. But yeah, the setup I used was from Craig's setup shop. So if you're trying to compare the gears that I'm using, that is because it's from that setup. So it's probably, I haven't tried Soalio's yet, so I'm not entirely sure if his gear ratios are the same as Craig's. But yeah, it's gonna be fun. So I hope you guys can get the most out of this. As always, we have got a slow drive-through around the track, and we have the flying lap with a far chase camera angle. Let's head into it. So here we are, guys. We are at the start-finish line, and we are going to head down into the first corner of the last track of this season. And now what you're keeping an eye out for are the board markers on the left-hand side, and in particular the 100 board marker. So we are going to be in all the way up through the gears at this point in 6th, and you are going to shift down. Well, first and foremost, you're going to brake first, just on the 100 board marker, or slightly just before it, and we're going to shift down into 4th, slightly trail braking into this first corner. Now this is kind of like a double curb, really. It's raised, so as you can see through the middle, it's slightly raised, almost like a sausage curb, really. And what we're looking to do is keep tight to the curb, not getting onto the sausage curb, not getting onto the raised portion of that curb, because if you do, it throws the car completely off, and you just it just completely affects your exit and your run up the hill to the bus stop chicane. So keeping things nice and smooth all the way around, and then as you just come out of the corner, we then want to be full on the throttle. And what's going to happen is the car's going to be pointing this way, and don't worry about keeping this car on this side on the right hand side of this track, or on the track, because what is going to happen is you're going to run over this curb, allow the car to run over the curb, get on the concrete, not too far, bearing in mind, because if you go too far, you're going to affect your entry back onto the track. Going round the curb and then back on, joining the track before this piece of grass on the left hand side, or just on the corner there. If you touch that grass, it's pretty much a 1x, and also it's quite bumpy there. It's kind of like a little dip, so I haven't experienced floor damage. Best to avoid it just in case, but it also affects your top speed, affects your acceleration. Of course, if someone's up behind you, you need every little bit of speed you can get running up the hill into the chicane. So yeah, don't run over this, or don't hold this curb, because if you hold this curb, the car bottoms out, kind of gets a bit like a train track where it just sticks to it. And I've actually had in some cases a 0x where it's come up as contact. So in some cases in qualifying, that it's touch and go. Sometimes it can invalidate your lap, even with a 0x. So yeah, best to, if you're going really slow, just avoid it altogether and just stick to the track. But if you get through the first corner right and you stick that exit, then you will need to use this concrete portion on the left hand side and then join back in like so, and then we make our way up the hill. Now this portion is pretty self-explanatory, pretty easy. Full throttle all the way, keeping it as close to the curves as we can without actually touching them, covering as little track as possible. Now this section towards the end of the race, when you're getting very worn tyres, may become quite slidey, especially this bit here up the crest through the narrow part, because it's just, yeah, it's a bit of a nightmare through here. If anyone who's raced F3 has experienced this before, this is a very popular place for crashes, and if you crash here, everyone behind you crashes. So don't do it, guys. Don't crash. Just be sensible. And yeah, if you feel your tyres are going towards the end, or even at the beginning, cold tyres, just lift off slightly. Best off just lifting off, and making sure you keep all four tyres on the black stuff really, and not end up in the wall. So working our way up the gears, covering as little track as possible. Moving over to the left hand side to open up the entry into the bus stop chicane, because this is the boot version. So what you're keeping an eye out for is the 200 yard marker, or 200 board marker on the left hand side, because this is your braking point and your turning point. Now it's not a big brake that you're using here, it's almost like just a dab of the brake to slow the car down so that you can shift it down into fifth gear, and you turn in, you'll be in fifth gear at this point, and we cut this curb like so. Now what you'll see is this kind of light portion of the track, or kind of a, yeah, just this portion of the track that you can see here. Now on the left hand, this curb here, we don't want to touch this curb really. We want to stay away from that curb. And as you get through, you're turning and you're staying to the left hand side of this light portion of the or two-tone of the track. I don't really know what to call it, to be honest. Stand on the left hand side of it, slightly over this curb, not over the left hand side of it. Speaking from experience, don't cut it too much, because if you cut it too much, it throws the car off, and it really affects your exit. The car's kind of all over the place, and it's a very fast portion of the track. You end up in the wall. I've done that plenty of times in practice, so ensure that you're on the bottom half of this curb, not on the top half that you can see there. It's almost like a lighter half, shall we say. and then turning right again, close to this curb, but not on it. It's because this is a very rough curb as well. You get on this curb and it really bobbles. So full throttle as you come out. Now through that section, you'll see in the flying lap, it's best seen in the flying lap, you go into that slightly trail braking, full throttle, half throttle, full throttle again. It's easier shown in the full lap, so have a look at my inputs when I go through there, because it's a very fast section, and it's important for you to keep it tight through there and carry as much speed as possible. There'll probably be a lot of accidents in that bus stop chicane, so on the first couple of laps, be careful on the entry to it. If you start to lose traction, or you go in a little bit too hot, shift down an extra gear just to slow that car down, just to get the car turning in more, because yeah, there'll be a lot of offs and a lot of incidents there throughout the week. So as we're heading in to the long right-hander, we're still in 5th gear at this point and we're on full throttle, and we're moving back in to keep it tight to the right-hand curb. Now at this point here, just before the traffic lights, you're going to slightly lift off the throttle because we need to get that car to stay tight to this curb and turn in. So slight lift off the throttle. You're going to be about half throttle, 3/4 throttle. Once again, have a look at my inputs on the flying lap, and back on the full throttle again, allowing the car to move out to the left on the lay of the track, moving over to this curb on the left hand side. Now ideally we don't want to touch this curb, because this curb is like a train track, and it's like glue. You get on it, the car sticks to it, and the only way to get off of it is at the end of the curb itself. And as you can hear there, sticks to it, bottoms out. That's why it sticks like glue and like a train track. Not nice at all. And the only way to get off is at the end of this curb. Now you're very lucky to not get an off track here. It's not the curb itself, but it's when you get off the curb, pretty much touching this grass on the left hand side is an off track. And it also, like the first corner or the exit of the first corner, it's like a little dip as well, and it can kind of bugger up your speed or slow you down quite a bit. And this is an overtaking opportunity here down into this corner. So yeah, in an ideal world, we only want to get like a couple of wheels on there, or not at all. You'll see, I think in the flying lap, I don't touch that at all. But all the way down. Now in this setup that I'm using, I don't shift up into 6th gear here. I stay in 5th. We do get near to the top of the rev limiter, but we don't change up into 6th, because what we are keeping an eye out for is this line here, or the change in the colour of the track. So it goes from a light tarmac to a dark tarmac. Now this is a left-hander, and we want to be braking on this line. That's what you want to be keeping an eye out for when, as soon as the track changes colour, and we brake and we shift down into 4th, and we turn in, keeping it tight. And as we get about halfway round, we then get on the throttle, full throttle. Allow the car to move out to the right. Now, you've got to be careful here, because timing is everything. If you get on the throttle too early, the car's going to move all the way on the outside, and you're going to run out of room, run out of track. And as you get on this stuff, it's not nice. It's very bobbly, very bouncy, and as you can see, there's no room for error. There's just barriers. So a bit of practice is required to know when to get on the throttle at the right time. But you come around the corner and we use that curb, using every inch of the track, heading down into long hairpin. Now, what you'll keep an eye out for once again is the 100 ball marker, and we brake just on it or slightly before, and we'll be in 5th gear at this point. And what you're doing is you're shifting down into 4th and then eventually into 3rd as we make our way round the hairpin. But you shift down into 4th, and this is kind of like this is very late apex. So what you want to do is you want to keep the car on this different shade, on the right hand side of this shade of concrete of the track, and it's here that you shift down into 3rd, sticking to that, and then around about halfway through, as it starts to narrow, as you can see, the normal part of the track starts to narrow, you then get on the throttle, keeping it tight to this curb, allowing the car to move out to the left hand side. Now, once again, it's another corner that you get on the throttle too early and you get on the power too early. It seems good as you're going through the corner, but then as you get on the exit, there's the smallest bit of runoff here, if you can see. And I've seen lots of people in previous races where they get on the power too early and you dip the wheels on this grass and the car just spins and you end up in the wall on the right hand side. So just be careful there. Once again, a little bit of practice required to know when to get on the throttle, but entry into that is very important, because if you can run too wide. But yeah, be careful about overtaking maneuvers as well, because it's not a tight entry. You have to know that the person you're following in front of you is gonna sweep back in around that corner, because it is a late apex. So you really have to make sure that it's a move that you're going to be able to get alongside them kind of before that. Because I've seen, once again, on streams and racing, where people kind of make a lunge and it's not, it doesn't work, because the space just isn't there. It just closes because they think that the person's gone wide when actually they haven't. They're just taking the optimal line, and they don't expect that person to make a move like that. So yeah, just be careful. But yeah, the exit of that is very important, because once again we come to another overtaking opportunity here. Quite a few of them around Watkins Glen. It's a good track. And we come into another hairpin. This one's a bit more traditional, bit tighter and a bit slower. And what you're keeping an eye out for is the 100 ball marker. Now, we aren't braking on the 100 ball marker because that's too close. I would say we're braking on what I called 125 marker, or 125, the imaginary line. So we're braking before the 100 marker. You'll be in 5th gear at this point, and we're going to shift down into 3rd, let the car turn in, keeping it tight in between the two-tone there, staying off this curb. As you can see, it's severely raised. You get on this and it's just going to throw your car off completely, and if you get on the power, you're going to spin. So we're keeping it tight to this, and as you get around about halfway around the corner here, as the car is pointing straight, you can then get on the power. You can get on the power a lot earlier here than you think. Round, and the car's going to move over to the left hand side, make use of that curb, still in 3rd, and then we're going to shift up into 4th, into a very tricky corner. Now, this is tricky for a number of reasons, because there isn't really a braking marker, and it's where you're going to see a lot of people spin, because it's a blind corner. It's very easy to get on the power too early. So you're going to be in 4th, and generally this comes down to feel. This comes down to feel with this braking marker. So I generally use I use the corner on the left hand side, the curb. Once I start to see the curb come into view, I then start to brake. And I'm turning in, trail braking here. And I'm not, and the key here is not to shift down too early. You shift down the gear into third too quickly, the car's going to spin and get from underneath you. So now roundabout is where you shift down into third, when you make sure the revs of the engine are low. And then we get on the throttle, easing on the throttle. You'll see my inputs on the flying lap. Keeping it as tight as we can, allowing the car to move out to the right hand side. And then when the track starts to flatten out and you're round the corner, that's when you start to get on the throttle. Use a little bit of runoff if you need to, back there, and go through. Now, towards the end of the race, that corner is going to be treacherous. People are going to slide all over the place, so extra care through that corner for every single lap that you take. More specifically, towards the end of the race too. Now, this is probably one of the easiest corners here. You'll be all the way up in the gears, and what you're keeping an eye out for is the 100 bolt marker, because that is your turning point, because this is flat out. And you keep it tight to this curb, flat out, all the way through. Once again, towards the end of the race, if your tyres are starting to wear off, slight lift if necessary, just to get round. Make use of that curb if need be, but you shouldn't have to. Trust the downforce in the car. And then we come into probably what is the most difficult corner on the course, on the track. For me personally, there's a lot of time that can be lost here. And there's a lot of time that can be gained on people with an overtaking opportunity into the first corner. So what you're doing is you're moving over to the left-hand side, and as the track kind of starts to, if you can see there, as the track starts to open up on the left-hand side, like almost like a little bit of a runoff, left of the right-hand line. Just as that starts, you want to brake just before it. Now, it's kind of like a dab of the brakes, like a hard dab of the brakes, because as you do that, you're braking and you're turning in at the same time, because as you want to turn in, staying in fifth gear. You're not shifting down, because if you shift down, you're going to lose speed. So you'll be in fifth gear flat round that corner, and then you dab on the brakes. And as you get here, what you're doing is you're aiming to get the car in that kind of triangle, in between, directing it to the narrow point of the track, where the two different types of track meet. And it's here that you then want to get on the throttle. The fastest guys will get around this corner and they'll nail it every single time. And they'll get on the throttle a lot sooner. But for me, I'm a little bit inconsistent. Even in my flying lap, I did nail it, but I do feel like I could have got on the throttle even a little bit earlier. So there's still a bit of time to be made there for me. But you want to get the car pointing in here, and as you get round, back on the throttle, full throttle, allowing the car to move over to the left hand side, using the curb. If you need to lift off, because you don't want to end up in that wall. And then full throttle to the finish line. And there we go, guys. That is a slow drive through around Watkins Glen, last one of the current season. Hopefully we can all end the season on a high. Hope that helps you guys out a lot. We're going to head into the flying lap now with a far chase camera angle afterwards. Let's go.